Welcome to episode 78 of Rebirth Revolution. My name is Melissa Olson. Since we last spoke, there have been multiple mass shootings. It's so disheartening to think that the only thing that slowed down these shootings was a pandemic-driven lockdown. We are seeing light at the end of the tunnel in terms of vaccinations returning us to normal. But what will normal be? Will the world we return to be too chaotic to even want to leave the confines of our homes? We know that there are some disturbing things going on in our society, and the pandemic is a magnifying event. Some people have been at home reassessing their lives and charting out the positive changes they want to make when the pandemic ends. Some have been at home absorbing all of the hateful, fear-inducing messages from those who benefit from manipulating them. They have been stewing in all of the hate and fear and are looking for any opportunity to unleash their rage on the people around them and people who are complete strangers to them. We see this in the shootings and the awful unprovoked violence towards Asian Americans. The fact that the messages of persecution and entitlement have resulted in the sale of many more weapons is a problem for us all. This is complicated stuff. It is multi-pronged. Of course, there is the issue of guns and the complete lack of regulation and accountability. But there are other issues at hand. We are seeing the results of having someone from a low level of spiritual awareness have power over others. He was able to ignite and inflame so much darkness in those who followed him. Even if he is no longer in power, the people he inspired to think as he thought and behave as he behaved are out in full effect. They feel righteous in their cause because of their leader. But then there's the problem with men in our culture. Why is it that men feel that the only emotion they can express is rage? Why do they so often turn to violence, either in their own homes or in the world at large? And why do they think that is their birthright? When the sheriff's spokesperson said, quote, "Yesterday was a really bad day for him, and this is what he did," unquote, after the accused killed 8 people in 3 different locations, we have to really ponder where we are as a society. How is anyone able to connect the dots between having a bad day and murdering people in cold blood? Everyone has been traumatized in the last year. We have all had life turned upside down. We have all had to deal with not having what we want when we want it, not having control over the things that made our lives make sense, not having access to the people who bring us comfort and joy. We have all had to cope with the limitations we have personally, no longer being able to stay busy enough to avoid confronting them. We have all had many bad days. We have all suffered trauma. Most of us have found ways to cope that have not hurt others. While many have figured out that a quart of Cherry Garcia in a good movie can have profound healing qualities, others focus on taking their pain and suffering out on others. What is the particular deficiency that makes anyone think that others should pay for their pain and frustration? We need to remind ourselves daily that the souls here in this school who are working at the lowest grade levels of spiritual awareness have a predictable way of thinking. They do not have empathy. They do not accept accountability. They do not think about or care about how their actions affect others. This is hard to process for those at higher levels because you are applying your own filter, the filter that comes with being at a higher level. You are asking how someone could do something like this. Don't they know how much pain and suffering they are creating? How does their conscience allow them to make these choices? It's unfathomable. But they don't have the same filter you have. Their decisions do not factor in the same concepts. If you have ever dealt with the outburst of someone who is at a low level of spiritual awareness, you have probably been shocked to find that at the end of their tirade, they actually feel better. They don't care about the carnage. They feel that they are able to unleash the dark energy that they are made up of onto anyone or everyone. The release of the darkness makes them feel better while making everyone else in their path feel worse. They like that feeling. They live for that feeling. Both of the feelings make them happy. The feeling of releasing their bile and the fact that they made someone else feel bad. This isn't something you can do when you have moved to the higher levels of awareness. You would be racked with guilt about hurting others. You would feel shame about causing harm. You would feel the need to mend anything you damaged. People at the lower levels of spiritual awareness have none of these thoughts. It is all about what makes them feel good in any given moment. The rest of the world be damned. And frighteningly, it makes perfect sense to them from where they are right now. You cannot talk a lower level person into feeling any of the appropriate feelings when they make these choices. You cannot convince them with logic. You cannot appeal to their better angels because they don't listen to them. You cannot shame them into feeling bad about what they have done. They have to grow to higher levels, and that is not something that they will do willingly. It will take time and most likely more carnage before they are willing to deal with their current state of awareness and wish to move to a higher level. It has to be their choice. In the meantime, we need to keep them away from other people and make sure they have no control over others. They will only use any power given to create more carnage. We need to always be aware that these people are in our midst and do whatever we can legally to keep them from further destruction. It's unimaginable the amount of pain and suffering that has been caused by these mass shooters. The sudden, violent, awful loss of someone you love will take lifetimes to process. It will color everything going forward and strip so many of the love and happiness that they would have otherwise experienced. There can be no stronger signal in this culture for the need for change than these violent murders. Our country has no excuse for doing so poorly in this regard. We are not the only country. We can see what has been tried elsewhere and what has worked. This isn't a given. We don't have to live this way. We need change, and we need it now. Part of that change will have to be looking at what our culture views as the only acceptable forms of emotional expression for men: anger, rage, and control. This is not working out for them, and it is not working out for the rest of us. Men feel the entire range of emotions. We need to allow them that and teach them how to manage their internal landscape. Everything moving forward is going to be about how we care for one another. The outcome is not guaranteed. We will need to be willing to pick it all apart and try things that don't work so we can move closer to the things that do work. We are all a part of constructing our new world, and we are up to the task. I read a tweet today that brought me to tears. The tweet was by @PrettiestFrog, and it said, quote, "My neighbor just dropped the cake she was carrying from her car into her house and sat down and cried until her husband carried her into the house, and I've never felt a stronger connection to any other human being in my life," unquote. The beautiful conclusion of the story is that this woman who witnessed the event was moved to bake a new cake for her neighbor and deliver it to her. The cake was for a Zoom meeting where the neighbor could see a grandchild who she had been away from because of the pandemic. The tweet brought responses from many about the moments in life that they had had similar to this one. I remember having a moment like that after my husband died, leaving me to raise 3 boys. We had been through the toughest of times, and I had held it together. It was all pretty much a nightmare, and I held inside everything that I feared and everything I was sad about. Then one night a light bulb burned out, and I just started sobbing. That was my last straw moment. It was all too much. It was the moment when I told myself that I just couldn't do this, which is obviously a dramatic overreaction. But the need to get a step stool and replace the light seemed like something I just was not capable of handling at that moment. It was all too much. And this is what set me off. Not the big things. One of the smallest things. After this pandemic subsides, we will all be faced with these kinds of moments. We will either be the ones crying in our driveway over spilt cake, or the ones who are witnesses to the crying. We are all more than a little fragile from what we have been through, and we're going to have to look out for each other. We will need grace, and we will need to offer grace. It is going to be unlike anything we've been through before. There are always people who are in the midst of dealing with life events like death, disease, job loss, relationship endings, and they are appropriately fragile. There are usually a few of them in the midst of many people who are feeling stronger and more on track. Now we are faced with no one feeling on track. We're going to be going back out into a world where everyone is either a raw nerve or numbed for self-protection. We have all experienced trauma at the same time. We have all been experiencing trauma for over a year now. We will be dealing with all the difficult emotions like hopelessness, nervousness, and suspicion of others. We are all warped a bit and unsteady from the sleep disturbances that the pandemic has produced. We have been forcibly detached from other people, so we will need to, in time, figure out who we want to reattach to and how exactly we plan to do that. We all have COVID brain, whether we've been infected or not. We can't remember things. We can't connect dots as quickly as we used to. Isolation and disruption mess with our brains for sure. I think that we are all less than a dropped cake away from sobbing. We are all going to be easily undone in the months to come. We are suffering from trauma, and we have been holding a lot in, which has to come out somehow. I suspect our last straw moments will be when we least expect them, and in places we would not otherwise feel free to express them. This is where our empathy is going to be critical. We are going to need to have compassion for ourselves and others and demonstrate that as often as possible. We will all be called upon to be the one who bakes a new cake. We will all need to create safe spaces for those who are dealing with their trauma. And we will need to be patient with ourselves as we deal with our own trauma. Life is tough right now, and we will be shaping the future by the ways in which we can support one another through the upcoming months when we still feel fearful of the virus and unsure about the accommodations we will need to make. Not only are we shaping the future through our choices, we are also healing our own wounds by attending to the wounds of others. This is such a beautiful phenomenon, the ability to step outside of our own pain to attend to the pain of others, and how that fixes us too. We are all in this together, so let's do this with as much love and compassion as we can muster. This is our moment. Thanks for listening to Rebirth Revolution. Let's all focus on how we're going to move forward and how we can support each other through these times. We have lots of light to share, and this is the time to let it shine. If there are others who you think might like Rebirth Revolution, please pass the word along. Until next week, check in on your emotions. Be a safe space for others. Bake a cake and wear your mask. Remember, you are loved exactly as much as every other person on the planet, not 1 ounce more or 1 ounce less. Stay strong and safe and kind.